Hey, how are you guys doing? So I'm going to ask you guys just to bear with me. Not feeling too well, unfortunately. So topic today is Cyber Counterspace. My name is Nithen. I live in Vietnam, right? And like a few other places in the world, it's a bit of a hotbed for hybrid warfare, right? Now, many reasons. Taiwan, South China Sea, etc. If you look at the dotted line over there, right, that's essentially the part of the South China Sea that China believes it owns. And I stay just to the left of these dots, and all these dots represent Vietnam's presence in the South China Sea. Now, what's super interesting is I'm staying just to the left of that, and every now and then we have these sporadic incidents where like the GPS goes haywire, right? Now it's not a GPS outage because those are monitored for, but it certainly strikes me as like counter space activity. So what is counter space activity? Anything that can disrupt, deny, or degrade space systems, but also manipulate space systems, right? And if you take a look, one of the places we see this a lot is with Russia and Ukraine, right? Interestingly enough, I got this picture of a defense analyst website for Pakistan, right? And the whole point that the defense analyst was making, correctly so, was that because Pakistan now and India are having an issue, and India has basically aerospace dominance, right? So the argument was that with the absence of launch capability, right? Pakistan can't launch, right? The analyst was saying that Pakistan needed to develop counter space capability. And I believe this is true. So there's different types of counter space. Kinetic, non-kinetic, electronic, and cyber, right? But in truth, right, there's two types of weapons you get. You get kinetic weapons, you get non-kinetic weapons. Under non-kinetic, you get electronic and you get cyber, right? That's how the flow goes. But theoretically, there's 4 types. Now, when you talk about kinetic, it's super interesting. But in terms of counter space, it's basically ASAT, right? Which is anti-satellite like missiles, right? Kinetic missiles, right? I'm not going to have a lot of time, but you guys should actually check out what's... you guys familiar with what's Rods of God? Yeah, you are. That's quite impressive. Okay, and the picture is actually that DF-21. It's called a Dongfeng 21. And it's super interesting because it's supposed to be like a top secret Chinese missile. What's interesting is the picture is like a Lego set of the top secret Chinese missile. And I actually got the link to the block. But the Dongfeng, essentially, the D20, it's a D21, DF21-D, is a anti-carrier missile. I don't know if you guys ever seen this. Has anybody seen this before? So there's a desert in China, and they've got replicas that are built to scale of all the various different American ships. And the Dongfeng essentially goes up into space, right? So you see it launch. You don't see it after that because it goes into the space realm, and then it comes down and it hits you in the terrestrial world, right? So we're really interested in the non-kinetic. So you've got the electronic. Electronic is like jammers and dazzlers. A dazzler is like if you were looking at shooting something with the scope, and I kept like reflecting light into your scope, right? And jammers, I think you guys are pretty familiar with. So why cyber counterspace? Because that's what we're here to talk about. So cyber counterspace, pretty much because low barrier for entry, easy to do, And also the problem is very, 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 the problem is like sort of easily understood, right? Because pretty much cyber and engineering don't ride together. So similarly to like OT in a mine, space infrastructure is like riddled with vulnerability. Now, one may think this is something for the future, right? So there's a research paper done by a university in Zurich, and they essentially count about 120 counterspace incidents between February 22 and September 24. That means there's a counterspace incident just more than one a week, right? So counterspace activity is rife. Actually, the reason why we were doing this research is we believed, you guys know the space agency got hit, right? Our South African space agency. Did you guys know we have a space agency? Okay, so, and then we had a couple of attacks in South Africa, which led me to believe it could be counterspace related. However, we did the research and it wasn't, right? So where's space exactly? Well, it starts about 180 kilometers up, right? And if you think about it, like a lot of people think of LEO, right? Low Earth orbit, right? And when you think of LEO, you're thinking about 2,000 kilometers up, right? And that's correct, but that's the upper bound of LEO. The lower bound of LEO is about 180 kilometers up, and that's about 10 times what your normal aircraft flies at, right? The basic space system, when you talk to anybody about a space system, what they typically think is it's only the satellite, right? But it's a satellite, it's a ground, it's a user, and it's the link between all three, right? And there's multiple cybersecurity frameworks, but recently there was like a space industry discussion around the cybersecurity frameworks. And what these guys said is the compliance to these frameworks actually detracts from proactive security. Now, why is this? Are you guys familiar with Sparta and Space Shield at all? But it's like the TAC, right? The MITRE TAC framework. The problem is like post-launch maintenance is like really difficult, right? You can't send a FortiGate firewall into space. And if you did send a FortiGate firewall into space, well, firstly, it takes a lot of mass, it does not fit for purpose, but it needs to stay up there for 10 years, right? Nobody here keeps a firewall for 10 years, right? The next thing that makes it really, really difficult is over that 10 years, the accuracy of the detection mechanism degrades. And essentially, what swap is it just takes too much resource, it takes too much weight, it takes too much memory, right? The other problem you have is you have all these binaries in space. And a lot of these binaries either come through a supply chain, and for IP reasons, or just the fact that they're 10 years old, sometimes there's no source code. So if you take a look at like what we do in Snowd Technologies, for those of you guys who do know Snowd, so last year we presented on our digital twin technology and simulation, and at IT Web we did how we're using large language models for deception. But none of that technology is feasible to go into space. And what's happening is we're actually adding GPUs, and this is not just Snowd, right? This is everybody. We're adding more memory requirements, we're adding more processor requirements, and we're getting further and further away from something that's actually usable in space. So if you had to take a look at like, okay, what happens if we take a U-turn and then we go in an opposite direction? The first thing is you're looking for something we call a massless embedded sensor, right? So essentially you want threat detection that's built into the firmware, right? And it can't be signature based. You guys understand why, right? Because number one is it goes up for 10 years and now you can't get the signatures up there. And also the signatures aren't really relevant. So it's got to be ML or AI based for anomaly detection. And typically, like, I think a a good solution would be if it used something like fully homomorphic encryption. You guys know what's fully homomorphic encryption? Okay, so when you transmit data, right, you'd encrypt it with like something like SSL. And typically we transmit data, we store data, and we process data, right? And when you store it, you can also encrypt it, right? But today when we process data, you have to decrypt it, right, to process it. So wouldn't it be more secure if you could store, transmit, and process all in encrypted form? That's fully homomorphic encryption, right? The next thing is you need it to be autonomous, right? You can't have human in the loop because there's no sort of human in the loop for space. And then you need self-healing infrastructure, assured micropatching. Assured micropatching is really interesting. So I don't have the source code to a binary, right? I find a vulnerability in the binary, and then I patch it without stopping the binary from running. You guys are familiar with binary patching, though? Yeah, okay, good. So, although you're making this U-turn, there's 1.8 trillion reasons why we should be making this U-turn. And why I'm really thinking this is a really good idea to speak about today is simply because how well positioned South Africa is to provide this kind of capability. Firstly, I don't know if you guys know, but a lot of aerospace components come from South Africa. Did you guys know that? Parts for the Eurofighter, parts for like space shuttles, right, come from South Africa. The other thing is we've got deep cyber capabilities and we've got deep history of engineering capabilities, right, because of our mining history, etc. And so we're really well positioned to bring these two worlds together, right? So collaboration between us as a community and the people who are like Etion Create. Etion Create does the components for the Eurofighter, right? It's like working together with these guys to produce components that are, as Steve would say, secure by design. Yeah, thanks, guys. By the way, this orbit is called the Lagrange orbit, and it's the orbit around where the sun casts a shadow with the Earth. I just thought it's pretty cool. Anyway, thank you, guys. Cheers. Bye.